We are in deep doo-doo, so let's talk about it. Yes, friends, yes. It is not a good week for democracy or, frankly, for anything politically, given what's going on in our country. Excuse me while I pour some blueberry coffee into my cup, because I'm going to need a lot of it as we walk through what actually happened starting on Thursday night during the first ever presidential debate, and then what has happened at the Supreme Court this past week with the announcement that Trump is immune from anything he did that was considered a, quote, official act related to the January 6th insurrection, which of course is going to have sweeping implications for the future of American democracy. I got to be honest with you, I have a lot to say. I'm going to try and get it all out as succinctly as I can, but bear with me because there are so many layers happening here and we have to expose what's actually going on. Let's start here. Joe Biden, Thursday night. Now, before I lose you, before you dismiss me as being, who knows, whatever, not loyal enough or something, a couple things you should know. First off, my allegiance is to the way of Jesus. I am not a Democratic sycophant. I'm not a Joe Biden worshiper. You're never going to find me planting a Joe Biden flag on my front lawn. My job, and also who I am, needs to call balls and strikes, even if it's painful to do so, okay? And so that's what I want to do here. Let's start by just recapping the debate. To me, if you watched that debate and didn't see the major problem that is Joe Biden, I'm not sure what to tell you. Now, this doesn't mean that he lost anyone who was going to vote for him anyway. But what it does mean is that if you have Trump and Biden on a stage and that debate happens and the average person who does not really follow politics like how we do, is not aware of things like Project 2025, doesn't understand what's actually on the line, they watch that debate and they see a current sitting president who can barely speak, who can barely get a word out, who makes no sense at times.
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous.
Do you not see the problem? There's a reason why even CNN and MSNBC commentators were freaking out the second after that debate ended.
This was a game-changing debate in the sense that right now, as we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party.
The panic that I am hearing from Democrats is not like anything that I have heard.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all.
I was freaking out. My friends were freaking out. People that I know and love who are aware of what's happening in our country were freaking out. This is not a time for us to bury our heads in the sand and think, oh, it's not a big deal. Here's why it's a big deal. Because, again, I know that the poll numbers might not shift a whole lot with the actual respective parties and their bases, but that middle section, the average American who doesn't follow this stuff, they're following. They're going to see that debate. How do you think that's going to turn out for them? How do you think they're going to perceive that? It's a major faux pas. And frankly, I'm very frustrated with the DNC and with Biden because whether you like it or not, Biden has aged immensely over the past 4 years. Here's him talking at the debate 4 years ago compared to now.
This is the same man
who told
set you up. By Easter this would be gone away. By the warm weather it'd be gone. Miraculous, like a miracle. And by the way, maybe you could inject some bleach in your arm, and that would take care of it. This is the same man.
That was said sarcastically.
That was the whole issue relating to COVID. He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. A lot of people died. Make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
I'm sorry, we got to call it what it is. Something does not seem fully right. And what bugs me is that there is so much at stake in this election. There is so much on the line. We don't have time to risk this. To give you how serious of a moment this is in New Jersey, which is my state, a very blue state that every time votes blue in federal elections. Only recently had a Republican governor, Chris Christie. He was a rarity. Okay, this is a blue state. Trump is currently up in the polls. It's not by much, but the fact that it's even that close, where Trump is up by 1 or 2 percentage points, is a big deal. We don't have time to risk this election, because what Trump wants to do in the Supreme Court that he picked, it's evident what's going on. It's evident what is coming, in my opinion. Now, you could look at the debate in 2 different ways, right? I want to try and steelman both of the positions that I've heard. One side says Joe Biden absolutely needs to step down and they have to replace him, based on not only just that debate, but just the past year or so, just seeing how he looks, seeing him get shuffled off with former President Obama, seeing him freeze in place several times, see him lose his train of thought in a way that looks very suspiciously like, are you okay? Is there something mental happening, as far as your mental health goes, etc. That's a fair thing to say, but pragmatically, I don't know how that really works, right? Because we are, it's July. We're a few months out from arguably one of the most historical and important elections of our lifetime. And we're just going to put him to the side and put someone new in place and get that guy or girl's message spread out to everyone and get all the money behind that person and get all the campaign behind that person. I don't know pragmatically if that actually works out. That actually might do the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, a disservice, because now you actually have to bring in a new person and get them acclimated and get the public acclimated to this person. I think it's too late in the game for that perspective, personally, even though, frankly, I totally get it. And if we were a year out or something, I would be saying the same exact thing, because there's still time to pivot. I just don't know if there's time to pivot now. The other side, right, is saying, you don't understand. Democracy is at stake. This is our guy. I don't care if he can't talk that well all the time. I don't care if he has off nights, right? A lot of people that I saw who were major Biden supporters said, listen, this is just a one-off. It's just a bad debate. And then, of course, Biden was at a rally like the day after that and looked sharp and look crisp, so they point to that.
3 times Trump was asked last night by the moderators, would he respect the election results if he lost this time? 3 times he refused to answer. 3 times. Folks, Donald Trump refused to accept the results in 2020. We all saw what happened on January the 6th.
And so what they say is, listen, what Trump wants to do in America is seriously, maybe even cataclysmically, erode democracy like never before. We don't have time to pretend that we can switch out Biden and actually have a shot in hell at winning this election. Those are the 2 options that I've heard. Now, I'm not going to, of course, my job is not to tell you how to vote. Of course not, or how to see this stuff. You have to do whatever you want, whatever your conviction is. That's your prerogative, right? Joe Biden has not made a lot of friends in more progressive spaces. His policy on Palestine and Israel has been pretty abysmal. He's pretty moderate with how he governs, regardless of what the right-wing media says. Joe Biden's so radical. That's a typical smear campaign. Look at his policies. They're pretty standard. They're pretty moderate overall. There's nothing super crazy about his take. We still can't get affordable health care in the country. Student loan forgiveness was shot down. He couldn't fix that. Joe Biden and his team submitted one of the most conservative immigration bills in American history, and Trump behind the scenes sabotaged it in order to play it off for this election that, Joe Biden loves criminals flooding our borders. Again, a complete misleading and just false statement. But it is what it is. It is what it is. It's where we're at right now in 2024. I mean, this is just who the nominee is. And I guess some people might say, well, we can look back after and try and pick up the pieces. Now, my concern, though, is that I just think we're in deep trouble, period. I don't think Biden is super compelling. And Trump, whether you like it or not, has a massive army of loyalists. I mean, you could argue they are cult-like, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, guys, I bought this book. Look at this. Is it my screen? Yeah. Christ Trump, Persecution of a Man. This is a book written about how Trump is a new Messiah, the follow-up to Jesus. I'm not kidding. It's a real book. There is a major cult of personality happening with Trump. It's happened for now almost a decade. He's funded powerfully. There are right-wing media organizations that do tens of millions of dollars in funding, hundreds of millions sometimes, that push him. This is going to be a really close election. And that scares the hell out of me. It really does. Because like many of you who are what we could call our high-informed voters, we know what's on the line. We know about Project 2025, and maybe you don't, so I'll give you the rundown. Project 2025 is a group of 80 or more conservative think tanks and organizations led by the Heritage Foundation that have created, I'm not exaggerating, a 900-page leadership mandate guide for the next conservative president to get elected, in this case, presumably Trump. They want to do things like abolish the Department of Education. They want to erase 50,000 federal jobs and make them dependent upon the president electing those people to positions. So not on merit, but on political affiliation. They want to wage war on DEI and wokeism and destroy it. I mean, it is literally if Turning Point USA wrote a playbook, which they're a part of this, and said, here you go, it's all culture war stuff. They want to abolish the EPA. I mean, it is bone-chilling stuff, and it's not a secret. You can go to Project 2025, you can buy the book, and you can read it. People like Sharon Says So and many other people, MSNBC, have covered the details. It should scare you. There's also things like Project Blitz. It's a group of highly organized people that are attempting to flood state legislatures with all kinds of Christian nationalism and far-right legislation, and their hope is that if 10 bills get struck down but one gets through, that's success. That's a real thing. You can go to blitzwatch.com to see how it all works out. Lest we forget, in Louisiana, they just mandated the 10 Commandments to be posted in all public schools, an egregious violation of religious freedom for people who are not religious. Ryan Walters, the superintendent of Oklahoma public schools, mandated, like overnight, that all teachers teaching grades 5th up through high school have to immediately start teaching from the Bible, which, by the way, can we just say, has Ryan Walters read the Bible? All of these people are so focused on protecting children from groomers, which we all know is just code for queer people. Has he read the Bible? Has he read some of the very intense adult-only themes in the Bible that he now wants 5th graders to be learning from? There are stories of sexual assault, of incest, of mass genocide, of gross depictions of sexual acts. I mean, you name it, it's in there. But, Ryan Walters overnight mandates it because apparently in his mind, the Bible is the foundation of Western civilization, which is such a ridiculous statement. Again, it's not about grooming, is it? It's not actually about protecting kids from adult content. It's about getting rid of their enemies, which in this case is the woke left for them, and instituting instead their version of what we could call a Sharia law. I mean, it is a militant Christian fundamentalism that drives all of this. This is all behind a Trump election in 2024. This is all behind MAGA. This is why I'm so frustrated. I tweeted pretty angrily about the debate. I was fuming. I texted a lot of my friends who work with me behind the scenes and who do this work in other channels, fuming. Like, are you kidding me? Is the DNC aware of what is happening? Are they aware of what is on the line? Like, are you aware? This is not like just a typical election. And let me be very clear. I understand, because I grew up on talk radio. I understand that some people could hear me and say, you sound like Rush Limbaugh used to sound, or you sound like one of the right-wing media pundits, right? One of the differences is that we can give you receipts. Look up Project 2025. Look up what Ryan Walters is doing in Oklahoma schools. Look up how in Alabama they ruled that IVF embryos are the same thing as children, which, by the way, we have an amazing conversation coming out about that with one of the leading embryologists in the world talking about that topic. Hi friends, if you're enjoying this video, I have a favor to ask. The New Evangelicals is a 501c3 nonprofit, and if you looked around at all, you've probably noticed that we don't offer member subscriptions on YouTube or Patreon options. The reason for this is very simple. It's been our mission since the beginning to offer all of our content and community resources completely paywall free. What this means is that we are completely dependent on the generosity of people like you who donate donate to make this work possible and accessible for all. If our content has helped you, would you consider donating to keep it all going? You can find the link in the description of this video, and to be very clear, this is not about giving to God or something like that. We're not a church and this is not a tithe. The ask is so simple. If our work has helped you, would you be willing to help us make this content accessible to more and more people? All donations made in the US are tax deductible and every bit helps. Thank you for your generosity. We can give you receipts. Look at what happened on January 6th. People stormed the Capitol building with Christian flags and Bibles and prayed a prayer to Jesus in the chambers.
Jesus Christ, we invoke your name. Amen. Amen.
This is not hyperbole. It's just not. Like, we need to wake up. There is a moment where if the sky is really falling, the sky is really falling. And again, we have the receipts. And we and many others have been sounding this alarm for years now, that there is such a major problem if a MAGA type of situation happens again and gets the power. Because I'll tell you the difference. In 2016, my understanding is that the MAGA side, Trump and stuff, when they got elected, it was a shock. They were not prepared. It was very much a ragtag team. Oh, we have to elect people. We have to hire people. Okay, and just kind of make it work. It was super dysfunctional. That is not the same thing. This world is fueled by groups like Turning Point USA, by the Daily Wire, by Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation. There is a plan in place to give Trump more and more power to enact in a very authoritarian way the will of what Christian nationalists want over all people. And perhaps one of the biggest pieces of evidence of that is what just happened this past week, where the Supreme Court ruled that if Trump did something as an official act, it's immune from criminal prosecution. What? I'm sorry, what? Justice Sotomayor, who dissented, said, "For fear of our democracy, I dissent." I mean, in theory, what this means is that a sitting president, Trump or not, could essentially say, "I order the SEAL 6 team to assassinate my political rival." It's an official act. And by the way, before you say that's so extreme, who would say that? Justice Sotomayor, who's a sitting Supreme Court justice, said that exact example in her dissent. This is a real thing. And by the way, I don't want Biden to have that kind of power. I don't want Trump to have that kind of power. I want checks and balances. I don't want an authoritarian ruling. I don't care if I would agree or not with their policies. I don't want that for the country. It's not good for anyone. It's just not. So here's the thing. I don't think we realize that behind the scenes definitely for decades, but more recently, there have been little chips away to all the little levers, the little fail-safes that protect the balance of powers. This court case is huge. The Chevron case was another big one, but that essentially what it did was it said, okay, it got rid of deference. So if the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is full of experts, they have the final say on policy instead of some politician or judge based on their lack of expertise. Chevron overturned that. This happened last week. So what that means is Project 2025 can be enacted more and more, because the whole goal of Project 2025 is to flood the political system and the government with essentially MAGA appointees and to have them rule over anyone else. And don't forget, friends, you have to believe me. You have to follow me here. What fuels this is Christian nationalism. Now, we've covered this so many times on the podcast, on YouTube, and we have more content coming out. We're actually planning a pretty big series on it. We're going to drop a trailer probably this week. Christian nationalism is behind the MAGA push. White evangelicalism in particular white evangelicals are the largest, most powerful voting bloc for Trump, period. This does not happen without white evangelicals and their networks and their bubbles and their system. And I grew up in that world, okay? I was homeschooled for 9 years. I was on the path to where a lot of these people are now. I defected when Trump came into power because I said to myself, this is not Christ-like at all, and that's how I started the New Evangelicals, etc. It's a long story. We can unpack it later. But what fuels this is a belief that God, the God of all the cosmos, the God who spoke into existence everything, this is the belief of many Christians, that this God has given conservative white Christian men the authority and the duty to rule over the 7 spheres of influence. This is called the 7 Mountain Mandate. There's 7 spheres off the top of my head. It's by education, business, the arts, entertainment, government. There's 2 more that are there. But essentially, it's all they call them the 7 mountains of influence. They believe that they have a God-given right and mandate to take over those 7 spheres and to rule over them. Project 2025 is a Christian nationalist endeavor. That's why the Louisiana legislature enacted the 10 Commandments being put in public schools. Do you think that Trump follows any of the 10 Commandments? Of course not. They don't care about that. For them, it's about getting Christian imagery back into the public domain as a way of stamping and saying this is our territory. The public schools are our territory. Of course, it's full of contradictions because the same people who are mandating this happens in public schools also support Project 2025, which wants to abolish the Department of Education and go back to like a real, like either a school voucher model or a private school model or homeschool model, which has its roots in white supremacy. It just does. Look up Jerry Falwell. I mean, this is the beginning of that. So I'm trying to explain to you, to kind of put it back on track, that what fuels the MAGA world is this belief. It's the belief that God has ordered gender a certain way. God has ordered hierarchies a certain way. God has ordained patriarchy to be the way that we live our life, not just individually, but as a society. There are people in this world who want to revoke women's suffrage. They want to revoke women's suffrage. I saw this being said when I visited America Fest last year, and in front of 14,000 people, I believe his name is Jason Whitlock, said from the stage that we should go back to a time when it was 1 vote per household, because back then we used to respect the family. We used to value the family.
And I will defend life before suffrage, because a vote used to represent the family. When we were a culture that really valued family and really understood the natural order that God intended, man serving God, woman following man who serves God, man and woman developing and nurturing children, you only needed 1 vote per household.
This is serious. Now, here's the other scary part. Trump's entire campaign thus far has been to seek political retribution for his enemies. In fact, he just retweeted, or he just retruthed, someone who posted a picture. I'm looking at it right now. It's a picture of Liz Cheney, and it says, Elizabeth Lynn Cheney is guilty of treason. Retruth if you want televised military tribunals. Donald Trump, the man who's seeking the highest, most powerful office of the land, armed with a Supreme Court that says, hey, if it's an official act, you're immune from prosecution, retweets that. Do not think that if Donald Trump and the base of MAGA had their way, you would not really see that on TV. These people are focused on retribution. They believe that this deep state has taken over the country. They believe that the folks who are being prosecuted for their crimes during January 6th are literal hostages. They're literally being held hostage by the Gestapo. That's how they see it. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I swear to God, a year ago I saw a video at, I think it was CPAC or some conservative rally. They had a makeshift prison, and they had a person acting as a January 6th prisoner of war, and there were people like Marjorie Taylor Greene praying over them.
But deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Jesus, we trust in you.
They are hell-bent on taking the power and then punishing their political enemies for this. That's what's on the line. That's why I'm so freaking mad that our options are Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I'm just being honest with you. It should not be this close. It should not be this close. The RNC is running a convicted felon who has been found liable for sexually assaulting a woman. I'm not using the R word because of the YouTube algorithms. He was part of overturning the election, or trying to overturn our election process. He helped create a fake electorate scheme where fake electors forged documentation in states certifying that he won when he didn't. He calls the January 6 prisoners of war and hostages. He has said to his base, I am your retribution. He has told people exactly what he'll do if he gets in office. And that man is polling higher than the opposition. Think about that for a second. It's a pretty freaking low bar. And that man is polling higher than the opposition. We're going to watch a nail-biting election this November. And it shouldn't even be close. It should be like a Reagan-level sweep, given who the RNC has put up as their champion. And let's not forget, all this culture war stuff detracts from actual real issues. It detracts from the fact that we still can't get livable wages in the country. It ignores the fact that the ultra rich have only gotten way richer since the pandemic and onward, while the middle class and lower class continue to erode. We aren't even having a discussion about affordable health care yet. We can't get student loan forgiveness done, even though the student loan system is set up in such a predatory manner. It's so unethical. We're not talking about seriously combating global warming despite worse and worse weather. Like, all this culture war nonsense distracts from real issues. And instead, we have to play this game. I have to come on camera and talk to you about Project 2025 and how Louisiana wants the 10 Commandments in public schools. Louisiana, their reading rate, they rank like 40th in the country. Their legislature isn't focused on getting that up. Their legislature passed a law to make the 10 Commandments mandatory in public schools. Where are the priorities here? This is what Christian nationalism cares about. They don't actually care about the well-being of all their neighbors. They care about maintaining power. It's just so ironic that we're going into July 4th, right? 4th of July, what is it? It's tomorrow, I think, or something. I don't know. It's these days all blend. I'm not sleeping well given what's going on in our country right now. And it's so mind-blowing. A lot of churches, they do what they call as Freedom Sunday. It's where they get real patriotic and they celebrate freedom and freedom from tyranny, yada, yada, yada. I mean, what is it? Robert Jeffrey's church, First Baptist Dallas, one of the biggest churches like in the U.S., who's a huge Trump supporter. Trump has spoken at that church on Sunday morning. They have like this ode to the military. I mean, it's crazy. We're going to cover it this week on the recap. It's insane. And it's all about freedom. And those same people are the ones celebrating a Supreme Court that only consolidates power in the executive branch and gives any president immunity if the act was official. How is that freedom? Freedom for who? Like, it seems to me that every single accusation these people make tends to be a confession. They claim that the left is tyrannical while they themselves are all about tyranny. They themselves want the power and control. Some of them would love to make America a theocracy. Some of them would love to put Jesus Christ as Lord in our Constitution. I'm not exaggerating. Look up Doug Wilson if you don't believe me. Like, this is real stuff. Real freaking stuff. Where's the freedom in that? It's completely inverted. And that brings me back full circle to this debate. Watching that debate, my blood was boiling. Because I just don't know if people who are not in the MAGA world or who didn't grow up in it or were on the path to it really understand what is exactly at stake for the sake of all of our neighbors. Christian nationalism wants to build crosses for all of their enemies. And if they can get the political power and the immunity to do that, they will absolutely do that. Make no mistake, if Donald Trump gets into office and says Joe Biden should be thrown in prison because I said so, they would celebrate that. They would cheer. They would throw Hillary Clinton in prison. They would throw Liz Cheney in prison. This is not the party of law and order. This is not a party who cares about the ethics of things or is really thinking about the best way forward and how do we navigate complicated situations. This is a party that's been taken over by Christian nationalist extremists. And I use the word extremist intentionally. It's not hyperbole. And I know because I grew up in it. Roe v. Wade being overturned, huge. 50 years they fought for that. Do not misunderstand. Obergefell is next. Queer rights are absolutely on the table. The civil rights being rolled back. Remember, the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action. It's all on the table. And what's frustrating to me is they've been saying this since the 80s. Look at what Francis Schaeffer said, what Jerry Falwell said. They've been saying this since the beginning. And those seeds that have been planted and fertilized and watered for decades are coming to roost. And frankly, as just being a political pundit right now, the DNC has been caught flat-footed. They have not been following this. I think maybe that this is where there is some truth to this like progressive elite conversation. I do think that there are people, progressives and Democrats, in positions of power in the DNC who maybe are not very religious and look down on people who are, and think that Christians overall are just really, backwards and stuff, and they have no idea of what's been stewing in some of the more extreme sections of that, and also ignoring some maybe their more progressive counterparts because they're religious and we're religious and they're not. And I think that this is one of those moments where I go, this is what you get. This is what you get for not paying attention, for not taking people seriously. We're in for a very intense election cycle, friends. I mean, there's just no way around that. There's no other way to square this. And I'm really concerned. I'm not concerned for me. I'm a white cis male. I mean, the system is built for me. I'm worried for my black neighbors, for my BIPOC neighbors, for my queer neighbors, for my disabled neighbors. I'm worried for my female neighbors, for my trans neighbors, my that's who I'm worried for, because this is all coming for them. Project Blitz, Project 2025, this whole world is determined to eradicate those kinds of people. Lest we forget, Michael Knowles, a Daily Wire pundit, said publicly at CPAC, we have to eradicate transgenderism. How much more clear can it be? The writing is on the walls. And the answer to that, apparently, is Joe Biden. I'm allowed to panic. Not because your mind's going to be changed, but because of how the average American thinks about this stuff. It takes more than 1,000 votes or 500 votes or however many votes to get someone in office. I hope you're feeling okay. I know this is a pretty drab video. I get that. I would love your thoughts in the comments if you think I'm on or if I'm off the mark here, or if I'm missing something. I tried to kind of consolidate the past 4 days of thoughts into a 30-minute video, and I'm sure we'll unpack more as we go along. But man, I am freaking terrified. I am. Last thing I'll say, maybe some good news here. What can you do? People ask me all the time, Tim, what do I do? You get involved however you can. Maybe you're a parent. Please raise children who are for all of their neighbors, who promote pluralism and respect religious freedom for all people. Please. That's part of the work. Maybe you feel really passionate about running for your local school board or for some kind of local office. Do that. We underestimate the power of local office. Do that. Get involved. Vote. Please, for the love of God, vote in the election. At minimum, just do that. Educate your friends about what's going on. Share people's content on your social media feeds. I mean, do whatever you can. Get involved with local organizations that are doing good work on the ground. Do something. Petition your lawmakers. Do something. The potential only silver lining, if we can even call it that, to this, is that my hope is that by seeing what's actually coming, the actual storm that's coming, not the QAnon storm that's coming our way, people get motivated to get up off their butts and start getting active in the process and start raising the alarm. I'm encouraged to see groups or people like John Oliver, MSNBC, and other people talk about Project 2025 publicly. That's really good. We need more of that. We have to expose what's going on. These policies, friends, are not popular among the general population. Most Americans are in favor of a pro-choice policy. Most Americans are in favor of queer rights. Most Americans want universal health care. This is the polling. And that's why Christian nationalism is not going through the typical Democratic norms, because they know that their policies are unpopular. If one of them gets on stage, like Joel Webbin, if he gets on stage and says, I think that America should be ruled by the patriarchy and we should go through every CVS and flush contraceptives down the drain.
We are going to behave as a Christian people. It means we are going to utterly abolish abortion, including in vitro, including the hormonal birth control pill, every single one of its forms, not just the Planned Parenthood clinic in Texas, but we're going to go down to the local CVS and we're going to start knocking those pills off the shelf. No more human sacrifice.
People would go like, are you crazy? So instead of him doing that, saying I'm running for office, he would rather work with people who are trying to enact things like Project 2025 through an authoritarian leader who will give them what they want. And to do that, you have to chip away at the checks and balances and the fail-safes. So you stack the Supreme Court to say that if a president acts in an official capacity, they are immune from prosecution. Do you see how it all fits together? It all works together for what is coming. That's what this is. The Chevron case, deference being overturned. That's part of this. It all works together. You have to forgive the bluntness, but these people are playing chess while many people in the DNC seem to be playing checkers, flat out. So yes, we should be worried, and that should motivate us to get active. I would love your thoughts, would love your comments in the video, or shoot me an email if you're listening to this on podcast. Thanks for being here. I know this is not the most entertaining or fun video to listen to, but it needs to be said. Talk to you all soon.